Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Jean Telljohann, and we're going to talk about her family from Naples and Calabria. So, welcome, Jean. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is one of my favorite subjects.
Me too. In fact, my wife tells me often, "Are you doing that again?"
At least I found someone to listen to me, you.
Good, good. So, the first question is, why and when did you start your research?
Oh, yeah. Well, I never knew any of my grandparents because my parents married quite late. They didn't have their family till they were almost 40 years old. And both my mother and my father were the youngest children of older parents themselves. So as a result, my grandparents, all but one, were dead when I was born, and that one died when I was an infant. So I never knew any grandparents. So I think that is partly why I've always had a curiosity about my background. And on my father's side, my grandmother's maiden name is quite unusual. So it's Mairu, Maieru, with an accent. We always wondered, could it even have been a French name? I mean, it's so uncommon, even within Italy, people don't recognize it as an Italian name. So that also led to some of my interest.
And that does sound like a French name, and that's not totally strange because, of course, the French were there for many, many years. Especially in the South. So, what did you find anything about that name?
Yes. So, and by the way, that name, it's curious. There's a city in Romania by that exact name. So I wondered, could it even have been this, that? Anyway, ultimately, I did get my answer, but it was a bit roundabout. So, since some of my other approaches didn't work, I was Googling and came up with, it's a very, as I say, an unusual name, but I came up with someone by that same last name in a small village in Calabria, and he is a local historian. So I thought, well, if he's interested in local history, maybe he's interested in family history, and maybe he can tell me something. So he is an author, published author. So I wrote to him through his publisher, and the message was forwarded to him. And ultimately, we did have a correspondence. And I've also had a correspondence with his brother, a retired math professor at the University of Cosenza. And he said, yes, it is a Calabrian name. He's asked everywhere he goes, is it Romanian? Is it Sardinian? Is it this? Is it that? But he said it's a very old Calabrian name. The original spelling was Majaru because the J was instead of the I at that time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Calabrian name. Now, ultimately, with the help of this man, I discovered my ancestors are from the same small village, Paludi, in the area of Cosenza in Calabria, that he is. We never discovered the common ancestor, but it is an unusual name in a very small village. So my assumption still has been that there's some connection there. And the other interesting thing about that grandmother, she had older siblings. She was the youngest of older siblings too. There's a history of this in my line. She has older siblings she had never met because they emigrated to Argentina before she was born. So I always thought that was interesting too. And I know that I have distant relatives in Buenos Aires, but we haven't ever made that connection.
So yeah, so that's pretty interesting, especially with the name. But of course, you have to be related if it's an unusual name in a small town. Right. We're going back, way back, and I love history too. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I started all of my research. So now, have you gone back to the town? Have you been there?
I have not yet been to Paludi, but that is on my list. I have visited, and we can talk about this when we talk about my father's paternal line, the area of Naples and the village of Bracigliano, where some of our ancestors are from. However, I'll call him a distant cousin, Palmino Mairu. One of the books he wrote was a book of historical photographs in Paludi. I have the book, and in fact, I'm sorry I didn't send you a picture of the cover, and I can do that later if you'd like it. But these pictures, if you could see, we're talking about the 1950s, 1960s, but you would think it could be 1850s, 1860s. There are pictures of women doing laundry in the creek, people riding donkeys. You know, it really is amazing to me what life was like there and not that long ago.
Yeah, it is shocking. You know, I never knew that I had any Calabrian roots because my father's family was from Naples, but then as I did the research and found out that they had land in Montebello and Fassato, and when we went there, I mean, now of course there's cars and everything like that, but when we had a meal, like a picnic, everything was homemade.
Oh,
The cheese, the ham, the wine, the olive oil, the bread.
fabulous.
And to them, it was like a matter of fact. Well, of course. Yeah, of course we made all of this stuff.
Right.
So, in a sense, it was really going, back in time in that respect. And it's kind of the same of mine on our trip. We hit my father's family. We didn't go to where my mother's from in Puglia, but we hope to go back next year and go there. So your dad's family is from Naples, yeah?
Yes. Well, originally the village of Bracigliano, and then it came to this country by way of Naples. So, and my great grandmother was born in Naples. So I sent you some pictures because what the culmination of part of this research, I've been to Italy many times. The first time was when I spent a semester abroad in college. I had started to study Italian in college and then spent a junior year semester in Florence. At that time, I was fairly fluent. I'm rusty now, but I can get around very well. So for purposes of travel, my Italian's pretty good. But my sister, who had never been to Italy, turned 60 on Friday. And she started dropping hints that it had been her life's dream to go to Italy with me because I speak the language and that would help her to get around. And her husband is nervous traveling places. He doesn't understand the language. So all around, this worked out great. So we had spent a week in the Dolomites. They had spent a week in Florence. And then we met on the train on the way to Rome because they'd never been to Italy. Of course, we had to go to the Vatican, the Colosseum, and all standard sites. So then we had a driver take us from Rome to Sorrento by way of Bracigliano, which is where our Amabile ancestors are from. And it's a lovely town in the mountains on very steep hillsides. There's farming that goes on there, but I mean, I can't imagine how hard it would be to try to cultivate these slopes because the grade was so steep. But it was a lovely town. We went into church. It was in beautiful condition. We walked around. It was sort of siesta hour, so it was quiet, but that was interesting. But then we went to stay in Sorrento. And one of the days from Sorrento, we did go to Naples and we found the exact building where our great grandmother, Grazia Festa is her name, was born, the exact palazzo. Here I have the map that I had prepared before going to Naples because I wanted to be able to find these addresses. Right near the Church of Santa Chiara. And then so my great grandfather, Raffaele Amabile, had gone from Bracigliano to Naples, and that's where he met my great grandmother. And then from there, they emigrated to the United States. But he lived on Vico Paradiso. I thought that was a wonderful name.
Yeah, that's a cool name. I'll have to look it up because my dad's family, they lived. My grandmother's family lived on Via Carbonara. And they were Caracciolo, and the palazzo was theirs. And now the hotel, if you know the Hotel Caracciolo.
Oh, well, next time I'll take a look.
And my grandfather's family lived on Vico Lungo, like a side street there. So they were kind of right in the same spot. Now, interesting thing about my Sorrentino grandfather, he was in the seminary studying to be a priest.
Really?
And I can't find this seminary. I don't know if it was in Naples or if it was in Cercola or Massa di Soma, where my grandmother's family also had places. So I'm going crazy trying to find the seminary because it's quite possible it's still there. But
of course it is.
I haven't had any luck. But isn't it like amazing to be on the streets?
Yes. And yes, not just the street, but when I found the exact palazzo.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. And if the courtyard was open, we were able to walk in and see
Oh,
the
nice.
as well. I
Yeah.
sent you some pictures of that, and my sister and I outside of the palazzo. Yes, so that was really fabulous. So
And not everybody has that feeling, but I feel just such this connection back to Italy and to these towns. And now, when you're in Bracigliano, did you meet anybody that could have been family or?
we went into a local cafe and I was chatting with someone there and he said, oh, yes, that's a common name in this town. And also Albano is a common name and, other that, which is not my family name. I'm just saying he listed some common family names.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's anyone still there. You see now in Paludi, the Calabrian side, if we have any relatives there, it would be quite distant because, between the eldest siblings going to Argentina and then the younger ones coming to New York, that was in the 1880s, so who
Yeah.
knows?
And so many people have left those small little towns and, if not to America, a lot have gone, north in
Exactly.
Italy to work
Exactly.
there. And I found several cousins of mine that are in the north. In fact, I just connected with one today. It was
Really?
today or yesterday? I think it must have been yesterday. Yeah, and then we were conversing today. Yeah. It's so funny because he sent me a message. I knew the name because I know his, I guess Nicola must be his uncle. Yeah, Nicola would be his uncle. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, oh, well, I'm the brother, the son of the brother.
Yeah.
And I have a group on Facebook for my cousins from America and Italy. And so everybody's just started connecting and sharing pictures. And I tell everybody that, like you did, Facebook,
Yes.
post the name, go try to look for the
Exactly.
town, and you'll never know what you're going to find.
Exactly. And actually, I've tried that with some of the ones in Argentina. I haven't got an answer yet, but not everybody answers. That's okay. The ones who do are helpful. So, and the other thing that I found very helpful, I did an ancestry.com DNA test. Well, some of those cousins that were unknown to me gave me information about the family tree. Other very distant cousins, even if we couldn't figure out the common ancestor, that's how I determined Bracigliano was correct, because there were two different, quite distant DNA cousins, but they listed their ancestors as being from that village. Now, you can't just go by that. You have to verify yourself. But then, and I'll talk about another research technique, antenati. So, the New York Biographical and Genealogical Society offered a seminar once, not that long ago, a webinar online, how to research your Italian ancestors. And it was tremendously helpful. First of all, the advice that the surnames in Italy are mostly quite place specific. So you can look at different websites to see where there's concentration of your surname. And then person showed how to use antenati. Well, as you may well know, the records are all digitized now, or for many of the regions, but not indexed. So it's laborious, but at least if you know the name of the village, and then each book does have an index, you find the index page, look through, and then, and keep a record of what you've seen and what you haven't seen, so you're not just going in circles. But anyway, I did find that some of these cousin matches and the information they've posted gave me some very valuable hints.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Right, and I definitely found the same thing. And as far as the Antenati, my mother comes from a very small town in Bari, Torito, and for some strange reason, I don't know why, all those records are digitized. You wouldn't think in a small little town, but I found I don't know, 150, I could probably find more, but I really just
Amazing.
concentrated on, great uncles and great aunts
Exactly.
and all of that. And what's interesting about when you look at those records is that you see the same names pop up, who was a
Yes.
witness for this person, was
Yeah.
the witness for
Right.
that person.
Right. And sometimes it says what the relationship is. of the
Yes.
witnesses. Yeah, because I found a death record recently and it was this son-in-law and this son-in-law, or, so that was helpful to me because then I was able to make a note. Okay, so I know that these daughters were married to these husbands and I have to try to look for the marriage records now. So, it never ends once you get started
I
too,
know.
right?
And what's really neat about the older, I don't think the new ones have it as much, but the older records had the occupations,
Yes.
which is always interesting.
Exactly. And sometimes I don't even understand the words because they're professions that don't exist anymore.
Yeah, well, every
Murder.
record that I find, I see the page before and the page after, you have this very neat script. And my records are all chicken scratch.
Oh, sometimes it is very difficult, but actually here again, some of these Facebook groups, they're tremendously helpful. You post a picture of the record and say, these are the words I'm having trouble making out. And people who are more familiar have been tremendously, it's such a generous community. Haven't you found
Oh,
that?
yes. I've gotten so much help from people too. And when I was researching the records in Torito, most of my grandparents' family were either seamstresses, the women seamstresses, and the men were farmers.
Mhm.
And going back to like 1780 or something, I found somebody I think he was a forest ranger or something. I was like, oh, finally somebody did something different in his family.
Right.
But I had a lot of help from my cousin Cinzia, who she started a Facebook group thinking she was going to find people from Spain, where the family was originally from, and Argentina or South America, because she figured because there was Spanish, they may have gone there. She never expected to find anybody in America. She had no idea that there was anybody in America. So again, to your point, you never know. You
That's
never
right.
know. So did you find any close relatives on Ancestry that you didn't know, or?
Second cousins.
Yeah.
To me, that's pretty close. And this was during the pandemic. So we met via Zoom, but I found out about a great aunt that I had never heard of. And I was able to, I love connecting the DNA matches to the tree. So when I can do that, I feel a tremendous satisfaction. But anyway, so yeah, I have. And on my mother's side, I found a cousin who lived, within 2 miles of me. We get together for lunch periodically now. We like each other. So yes, I have found, as I say, second cousins. So to me, that's pretty close, that people I'd never heard of.
That's really cool. Now I got contacted for somebody. She hadn't done Ancestry yet. I don't know how she found me. But she says, I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piramalo. And I said, of course, that's my grandmother's aunt. Only 2 of them came to America back then. My grandmother's and grandfather, and her aunt and her uncle, who had come 10 years before. And I said, of course, yeah, it's the same person. But she had a doubt. She did Ancestry. And she came back and she says, it says we're not related. And I said, well, that can't be, because it says we are on my Ancestry. So I don't know how it doesn't show on yours. She contacted them, and I guess they made a mistake, or they figured it out, and they matched it up. But the interesting thing in the whole story is, we did not know that our families in New York and New Jersey were joined at the hip from the 1920s through like the 1960s and 70s. Now, we never knew each other, right? Maybe quite possibly we met someplace when we were little kids. But we had no idea. And, once we started piecing this together, she started sending me photos of my family, of my aunts and uncles that her grandmother had saved.
That's fabulous.
In Flushing. Now, we lived not far away. Her cousin lived with her grandmother. And we used to call, she was my father's cousin, but you know how the Italians, everybody's aunt, so she was Aunt Beatrice. And I remember my parents saying they were going to Aunt Beatrice's house. And we lived in College Point. They lived in Flushing. It wasn't that far away. We finally met a couple of years after we met online. She came over the house with her cousin who lives in New Jersey, who lived in Flushing with his grandmother. And I said to him, I lived 5 blocks from there when I married my first wife. And I moved into my cousin's apartment, my cousin Louisa. And he said, was that the one that had the long staircase going up? And I said, yeah. He says, I used to go there.
That's amazing.
We were disconnected for 30 years or something like that. And through ancestry and through all of this, we came and Jean's mother worked for my grandfather had an embroidery shop. My grandfather and my uncle had an embroidery shop in New York City. And Jean's mother worked for them in the 1950s. And Beatrice saved beads from that shop. And when Linda came over, she gave us samples of the beads that her grandmother. So these beads were like 80 years old.
Oh, wow. That's
So
wonderful.
it's crazy.
Well, actually, I have a story similar. My nephew went to a day camp one summer in New York City. I happen to be in the city today. And at the end of the camp, they did a musical, and the music director, his last name was Pontecorvo. I thought, oh, that's funny. I remember my father talking about these cousins, and he still kept in touch with them and saw them in Florida. Sure enough, this teacher of my nephew was his 5th cousin. So, so in the old days, you'd say, oh, that's a familiar name. I know we have some relatives, but you wouldn't know, right? But now if you could see my tree, it's like an elaborate spider's web. I know for sure. That's her 5th cousin.
Well, my kids are adopted. We have 2 kids, they're adopted. And my son is a 5th cousin of my wife through Puerto Rico roots.
Isn't that incredible?
That's crazy.
So that placement was meant to be, right?
Yeah, well, that's what we say. That's what we say because my wife's father was from Puerto Rico, and it's 5th cousins. So strange when you find that kind of stuff out.
Exactly.
So I have to ask, since you did
Yes.
the Italian, your family now, did you do your husband's family?
Oh, please. I have traced. No, oh, listen, now you're really going to get me going because, yes. So one interesting thing I've discovered, because he is from Germanic and Swiss and Dutch origins, those records go back very far. On his Swiss line, I have him back to the 1200s, and there's a crest and all, yes. But here's the interesting thing. One night we took our pastor and his wife out to dinner, and just to be polite, he was asking about some of the things I'm involved with, and I'm involved in this genealogy. So, oh, that's interesting. He said, I have a family member who has written a book about our family history, and our family dates back to these Anabaptists who were expelled from Switzerland for basically being, religious troublemakers. Anyway, and he said what the original form of the name was. Well, sure enough, as I was continuing my research into my husband's background, I find the same name in his tree, and I was able to trace back that this pastor, who's the senior pastor of our church, who married our daughter, he's my husband's 10th cousin once removed.
Wow.
But my husband also has some Revolutionary War history. Actually, I promised him as soon as I finish this interview, I'm going to set aside my side and turn back to his side, because I am eager to get that documented. We have 4 grandsons now, and before the 250th anniversary of our country, I'd really like for them to have more of a sense of how they connect to the Revolutionary War history. And my daughter-in-law is also the descendant of several Revolutionary War soldiers, so they have a lot of that background.
So you'll find this interesting. My second great grandmother was from Lucerne, and I was shocked because who thought there would be Switzerland? But what I found out was that the Catholic cantons in Switzerland would send mercenary soldiers out throughout Europe. And before Italy, when there was still the Kingdom of Naples, they had mercenaries, Swiss Guard in Naples, assigned to the Neapolitan army. And I found that by just bouncing around these books one day, and I found, I knew that my great-grandmother's name was Moore, because I have these records going back, that's the noble side, and they go back to 1000. And I knew her name was Moore, and I came across a couple of books of the officers of the Neapolitan army, 1860, 1855, 1853. And I found Martino Moore. He was a captain in the Swiss Guard in Naples. And I said to myself, gee, I wonder if this could be, her father. At the same time, the person who's, who's going to marry her, Filippo Caracciolo, he was a lieutenant in the cavalry. And her father was a captain in the Swiss Guard. So they must have met at, you put these things in your head, they met at a ball or whatever, right? They met someplace. They got married. And I was able to find the record on the Antonati that showed that proved that. The spelling was off, so it took some time. So then I go out to Google, and I Google Swiss records, right? Because I never thought there was any Swiss. And I found a group, and they said, if you have any questions about Swiss ancestry, send us an email, and we'll send us an email in Italian, English, or German, and we'll respond. So I said, this is Elisa Moore, Martino Moore, and he sent me a link to the records for the Lucerne Canton. And like you said, I've gotten them back to 1300, because the Moore family was one of, they didn't have nobility in Switzerland, but they did have these prominent families, which kind of ran everything, at least in Lucerne. And I found Moore was one of these families. They had handwritten trees going back to the 13th century.
It's fabulous, really fabulous.
It's
So where's the
unbelievable.
tree? Where is the handwritten tree?
It's I'll send you the link. It's in German, so and it's about this yay long, right? But I'll send you the link. And it was quite incredible to find these families. So then I find out he is one of the not too far back. They married a family, Amrine. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but it's I guess a prominent family again in Lucerne. And I found a website for them, and I asked the person there, do you know them? Yes, of course we know them more. He sent me from a place in Lucerne a crest that showed my second great grandparents, the Moore crest and the Caracciolo crest intertwined from Switzerland.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
And where did he find that?
He knew about it because it was his family.
I see.
So he knew he knew where this was, had a picture of it, but it just blew me away.
Yeah,
blew me away.
I'm eager to get back to that whole side for my husband, because I would like to go to the area of Switzerland. I don't remember now the exact area,
Yeah.
but I can I can pick that up again, that research.
Yeah, I'd love to go. I'd love to go to Lucerne, because apparently too, because Switzerland, I guess, was part Catholic at the time and part Protestant. So Lucerne was a Catholic canton, and I guess that's why they had this thing with Naples and was sending the soldiers to Naples at the time.
That is interesting.
Now, my daughter, we met her birth parents, and I was able to trace her back. She's got some Revolutionary War, some Civil War, but she's a direct from Daniel Boone and Captain Morgan the pirate.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Now, Captain Morgan the pirate is a direct ancestor of Daniel Boone.
Oh, I'd never heard that. You see, I just
Yeah.
think this is also interesting. Yeah.
And I've gotten her back to England, and was a 16th or 17th cousin of Princess Diana. She's got some dispenser in her.
That is amazing.
So, for people listening who think that they have, like to you and like Nicole, if you could find a gateway ancestor, and I don't know do you know what a gateway ancestor is? I'm not sure if you know.
Well, I have heard this expression, so please feel free to define it for me.
Yeah, so a gateway ancestor is somebody that came over either on the Mayflower or into Virginia that can trace back to British nobility. And there's several of them. And most, if not all, I don't think all, but most of the US presidents can trace back to the kings and queens of Europe, specifically, mostly England. But yeah, that's what a gateway ancestor is, somebody who gets you back to the royal families in England.
Oh, it refers specifically to royalty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't understand that. Well, one of my husband's revolutionary ancestors was married to someone from Virginia with an English name. And this is just on my list to research. So I'll be curious to see what I find.
Yeah, I have a post, and I won't swear to the royalty thing, but I'm pretty sure. It may not be royalty, maybe just nobility, but I did an interview with Kai White, and he's an expert on this, and he drew my chart. I'll send you that interview so you can listen to them, because he explains it. Because I asked him what's a gateway.
Because you have several episodes. So I would like to hear it. How many people do you think listen typically to one of your episodes?
I got 50,000 out of, listens. The average is probably 500, something like that.
Fabulous. You see how much interest there is in the subject.
Yeah, and the reason I started it was I was doing the blog, which was great and was fun. But it was one way. So now when I get to talk to people like you, or, sometimes, if it's an author or a genealogist or special, because you're getting two sides of the story and it's a conversation rather than me just blathering on about something that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And my book comes out in a couple of days. So I'm excited about that.
Tell me about the book.
So it's kind of like in three parts. The first part is what I found out by talking to people like you, some interesting stories and just incredible things that can't be coincidental. The other part is about my research and my family and growing up in an Italian family and my grandparents and my research and how I found some interesting things about them. And then the third part is about some of these noble families that I found in my line that I think hopefully will be interesting to Italians and Italian Americans, because we hear so much about the nobility of France and the nobility of England and, the nobility of Spain, but nobody realizes that Italy was concoction of all of these little kingdoms around.
Right.
And who was fighting wars with who, and the popes are all involved, and who was poisoning who, and all this kind of stuff.
And in Naples, they were still to this day referring to the unification of Italy as a takeover of their kingdom.
That's right. That's right. And that's one of the things that I learned when I was there too, because I said, why do these people, why do they treating me the way they're treating me, right? Like, because I'm from these families. And I was told, because they don't forget that these families, these noble families, for the most part, they took care of the people. They were like their, parents almost. They gave them farming, they gave them industry, they employed them. And after the unification in the South, that all disappeared. They thought they were doing everybody a favor, but the farming nosedived because they didn't own the land. The people didn't own the land, the nobles owned the land. So once the North started taking things over, the whole structure just, collapsed. That's what they told me. They said, Italians think different than us. They don't think as history as being something, 10 or 20 years ago. They're thinking hundreds of years ago. And they still know these people, they know of these people, and they still appreciate what they had done. It's totally outside the realm of, our way of thinking,
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened in my Calabrian side, where they were olive farmers, is that as the families were big, and there's only so much land, so the farms just couldn't support the number of descendants.
Well, and that too, but in most of these places in Calabria and Puglia and Sicily, the farmers didn't own the land. They didn't own the land. Some did,
right.
Some did, but for the most part, they didn't. So when the nobilities lost the right to the land, from what I heard from talking to a couple of people who know much more about it than me, is that the North stole everything from the South. I mean, to put it simply, that's the way they feel. That they came and took whatever wealth was in the South, they took it. So, it's sad in a way.
I don't know enough about the land reform and how,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about how it went.
That's why they started to come in the 80s, because there was no structure anymore. What they had before all disappeared. That's the way it was explained to me.
Mhm.
And so, of course, they had to do something, and they started coming to America, and well, that's why we're here. Your husband now wants his side done. I understand that, but
I mean, I've done a fair amount of it. Yeah. My son-in-law, also my daughter-in-law.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
I
You have
think he
people
was
interested. My family is like,
No.
once in a while, if I come up with something really interesting, they'll say, "Oh, really?" And then they, To me, it's the history of the family. What could be more exciting than the history of the family?
Yeah. And it's so much more possible now to do the research because of these digitized records, because of the DNA that can help you to identify relatives you didn't know about who might have documents, history, photographs, all kinds of things. So, I mean, I think our job is easier than it would have been 50 years ago. I would have certainly run into brick walls then and not had the drive or the patience to persist.
And like we said earlier, Facebook, I've gotten so many pictures of places and people in Italy that you never would have seen before. For example, all my grandmother's brothers. My cousin had those pictures from the 1920s of her brothers.
Wow.
So, and when you start to see the family resemblance and everything, it's really pretty cool. Yeah. Not that everybody looks exactly alike, but you kind of get that feeling. And so when are you going back?
Oh, listen, I could go to Italy every year and never.
I could stay there.
Exactly. No, I do. Actually, I'll tell you another reason I hope to go back. I play the mandolin, and there's a well-known mandolinist there who, Carlo Aianzo, who leads a workshop at Christmas and in the summer. And I'm hoping one year to go in the summer. So combining two of my interests, Italy and mandolin.
Well, I play guitar badly, so. But I'm trying to learn this. The music is easy; it's 3 chords. But I'm trying to learn this song from Calabria. It's in Calabrian dialect.
Oh,
It's not in Italian.
right.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
Oh, Yeah, I don't know any of the dialects.
Well, I mentioned this on the previous podcast. They sent me the words. They typed it out, but it's looks nothing like Italian.
Oh,
And so it's very hard to get phonetically to sound it out, especially when it's so foreign to you. But
yes.
I get it. I keep listening to it. So eventually I think I'll
Oh,
hook
of
up.
a recording. Well, then, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's one of the songs that they sang when we were in Fasado, where they had this group where they were just playing old folk songs. Well, Gene, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. As you can tell, I love it like you do.
Yes.
And I love when I talk to people and they talk about their family and they have smiles on their faces, and that kind of makes my day. So I do appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. So thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you, and I look forward to listening to some of your future episodes.
Okay, thanks again.